I just want to tell you my quick story and my why, and hope that it can inspire others to not wait as long as I did to be okay being truly who they are. This is my family. People say where you're from. I'm like, I have no idea, because I'm an Army brat, a proud Army brat. Look at my daddy-o. My dad is my hero, and my mother. My dad, actually, if I could brag, he broke the color barrier at Army at West Point. The first black man, he's kind of great. The first black man to ever play varsity football at the United States Military Academy. He did it at the highest level, All-American, East-West Shrine Game, eventually an Army Sports Hall of Famer, track and field as well, so my dad's my guy. That's where my love of sports came from. In case you didn't know, I used to work at ESPN, sportscaster, that was the dream. But when people say, where are you from? I'm like, I don't know. By the time I was 11, I lived in 4 different countries and have kept moving since through a crazy TV career. And in 6 weeks, by the way, I'm moving permanently to the free state of Florida. Thank you very much. I know. So military family all over the world, and like my dad, West Point, right? So, for instance, he tried to keep us very tight and structured. So every Saturday morning, we'd have to do a room inspection, just like when he was at West Point. So literally, you guys, he'd come to the door, knock twice, and of course, we'd come to attention and salute, and he'd critique the salute, and he'd be like, are you prepared for inspection? And we're like, yes, sir. And it was fun. It was a competition between me and my brothers. I always won because I'm perfect, and they're not, obviously. But honestly, like, we'd go through, and if your bed corners weren't tucked in properly, that's an infraction. If there's dust on the dresser, that's an infraction. If you open the drawer and the underwear is not folded, that's an infraction. Every infraction was 10 push-ups. So my arms were like cut. I had great arms from a very young age because of all these push-ups I had to do. So, room inspection. One thing he made us do as kids, though, memorize this. This is part of the cadet prayer at West Point that he had to recite 100,000 times as a cadet. Make us to choose the hard or right instead of the easy or wrong, and never to be content with a half-truth when the whole can be won. How'd I do? I didn't even look. I memorized it as a kid. So focus on those words. Those words saved me. Those words changed my life. And you can apply it to any aspect of your life. For instance, I know there's no one in this audience that does that with grocery carts, right? If you do, disgusting. If you do that and I see you, I will call you out. I might start a fight because I think it's lazy and ridiculous and rude. Oh, your time is more valuable than the poor kid that has to go schlep it in the rain. Put the car. Oh, or you're the one that like spends 60 seconds trying to align it on the line so it doesn't hit. Just put it back. Do the harder right. Put it back, right? So it could be something that simple, or it could be something that can alter your life for good. 6 or 7 years ago, NFL Films did a piece on my brother, who is, he'll get mad if I don't say the right title. I think it's the Senior Vice President of Public Relations and Communications for the Baltimore Ravens. Any Ravens fans in here? No? Good. So they were doing a story on him. I don't like them. I just cheer because he gets a bonus and he has cute kids. Otherwise, you know. Anyway, they did a story on him, and in doing so, talked to my parents. And my parents' story is beautiful. Their decision to choose the harder right despite tough times has driven me and helped me make every tough decision in my life. I have video for proof. This is a snippet of the NFL Films piece from a few years ago. Take a look.
We ended up getting married at West Point. We were young and very naive. My parents pretty much disowned me and didn't come to the wedding or anything like that.
Mom and Dad won't talk to her because she married a black man. They were in Panama, and she called her mom to say, I'm gonna have a baby, and her mom hung up the phone.
Because of my parents and all, I didn't count on other people. It was just, I knew I could count on Gary.
There were many things that were said about what a relationship with a black husband would be and how you would end up being treated, etc. And so how are her parents going to know she's okay? So I believe it was once a month.
Once a month.
And once a month, I would pen a letter. Here's where we are, here's what's going on, here's what we're doing together. Never received a return letter.
They were always really nice letters. I mean, I questioned them every month. I'd say, I don't know why you're doing that. I do not know why you're doing this because they'll never write you or anything. And he'd say, they need to know you're okay. All right.
It was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
It was to prove a point. You know, I am taking good care of this young woman. I am doing the right thing. When we finally did get together and I had the opportunity to meet her father, he says, Gary, in his voice, you know, he says, Gary, I'd like to just forget this and move forward from here. And I guess there was a little bit of a burr under my saddle there. And I said to him, I said, Duke, I said, I can never forget the last 6 years because I had to live this. But this is day one of our relationship, and we go forward from here.
So, talk about hard to write. Easy or wrong. This is in 1970, 71 when my parents got married. Coming off the civil rights era, obviously the world was a very different place. For my dad to choose the harder right there and to write those letters. I didn't know that story until NFL Films did this piece, which, by the way, it's much longer. It's pinned on my X account if you want to take a look, because it does describe my why. But for my dad to do that and do it in a classy way, when he could have been angry, right? And maybe as, if not more importantly, for my mother, at 22 years old, to take that chance, to have to choose between your family and the man that loves you. They don't see color, they saw heart, and they loved each other. So I've seen it 150 times, and every time I get choked up, so forgive me. But they're my why, and that's why when I announced in 1984, exactly 40 years ago, like this week, when I was watching the 84 Los Angeles Olympics, that I wanted to be a sportscaster. Like 40 years ago right now is when I was 11 years old. And I said to myself, this is what I want to do. And they're like, it's going to be hard. And it's been hard. But I think back to this. So I have no excuses. And so when I started to go and graduated from Indiana University in 1995 and started in South Bend and then went to Indy. And this is so unfortunate. I mean, the hair, the eyebrows, like I don't know why they didn't fire me with this hairstyle, but they kept me. And then they're like, please go. Went to Tampa after that, the ABC, Fox Sports Net Florida, then to Comcast Sports Net in 2001, where I had married my college sweetheart when we were in Florida and began to have kids. In 2004, I got the call that I'd been waiting my whole life for as a sportscaster, and that was to work at ESPN. And they had me come up for an audition, and I had a 20-month-old at home, and I was like 9.5, 12 months pregnant with number 2. And so I was like, oh, now they're calling? Great, I can't fit into anything. And it's a much different time, you guys, with how they accepted the bellies on TV. And so whatever, I went up and I did the audition, and I have this child bouncing on my bladder the entire time. It's when they roll the wrong tape to try to see how you handle adversity. I'm like, whatever, you guys, I have other important issues. Needless to say, I got the offer, and I went back, and something didn't feel right. And I talked to my mom and dad and my husband and my agent, and I turned it down. When this was my dream since I was this big, and they're like, my parents were like, are you okay? Like, you've come from being this super shy, awkward, weird, ugly, but super shy kid with this crazy dream where there were no women in 1984 doing this. Certainly no women who looked like me, and I was gonna get the shot, and I just knew, based on what my mom and dad did, always keeping us as the priority, I turned it down. And my agent said, listen, sweetheart, ESPN doesn't need you. You need ESPN. They're going to blackball you. This is not going to happen again. And I just prayed, and I said, if I put my career before my kids, because I knew I wanted to have more. The late, great Stuart Scott, booyah, like he was my guy at ESPN. He believed in me long before I believed in myself. He said, if you go, be ready. They will eat you alive. And so I knew that I wanted to have more kids, and it wasn't on national TV. It wasn't going to be the right fit for me is what I felt. And so I took a chance. I prayed about it. I re-signed a contract in D.C. 3 years later, I got the call. And it was a better offer this time, too. Thank you very much. And so I just knew, Mom and Dad, like they taught me the right way. The harder right was to listen to your heart and not with this dream career. The harder right was to focus on my babies and not this TV thing. So, but I wasn't trying to like make a statement. It's just what I felt in my heart through some prayer. So I did it, and then in 2007 came back and then made it to the worldwide leader in sports. And literally, you guys, that was the ultimate. 2007 was when I got there, and I was scared to death, and I was awful. But I improved. I got mad because I did suck, but I got better, and I worked hard, and I took the criticism, and I was able to do a little bit of everything. These aren't even all. I should have put better pictures. My dad did not pick the best pictures. I'm going to talk to him about that. But I got to do everything. I hosted Super Bowl coverage, and at the World Series, and at the Masters, and the PGA Championship, and everything, Stanley Cup, like every single thing this little shy Army kid, homeless girl dreamt of, I got to do. I got to give the commencement speech at Indiana University 20 years to the day after I got that. Anyway, I got to do a little bit of everything here, and then the world changed. 2020. Pandemic shut us down, ESPN's in Connecticut, kids out of school for weeks and months and no sports, and literally walking around with plastic shields in the hallways and in their classrooms. I can't. I might have started a couple fights with administrators back then, but kept it to didn't get fired at that point. Also George Floyd. And what I did apparently was a no-no. I had to make a decision with a mandate. I wasn't comfortable with something that I didn't think had enough research. A simple Google search told me it took 6 to 9 years. It became political, it was financially based so quickly. I just wanted more time, but I had no choice in order to keep my job. And I, unfortunately, since divorced, it's every financial aspect of my kids and my ex-husband, it's all on me. Like, if I don't work, what do I do? So people say, you have a choice, and I guess we do. But in that instance, I felt like I had none to support my family. So I remember praying about it, and on the very last day possible to get the vax before I would then, be fired, I prayed, and I got in my car, and I made an appointment at the local grocery store in Connecticut, at the pharmacy, and I walked in, and I'd been sobbing in the car because I felt like I was caving. And what am I allowing these people to do? And basically, I went in, and the nurse was so kind, and she looked at me, she's like, are you okay? And I said, no, I'm being forced to do this to my body in order to keep my job. And this wonderful woman looked at me, she said, it is so wrong, and I am so sorry. And she held my hand. Something changed in me at that moment when she put that needle in my arm. Something changed. I don't think I knew that until later, but I do now. And I left there, and I had previously planned a podcast to go on with Jay Cutler, former quarterback for the, good job, thanks ladies, for the Chicago Bears. There's always gonna be trivia issues in here, or questions in here, good job. And he had just started his podcast, they asked me to go, I said sure. And then I sit down to go, and I'd been crying because I caved. And he's like, what's that? And it's the Band-Aid. And so he asked me about it. Among other things, I got in trouble for a couple different comments. Again, wine, we'll talk later. But he asked me about the vax and taking it, and I took a deep breath, and I said, listen, I think it's sick and wrong for any company, any employer to force someone to do something to their bodies that they're not comfortable with. I think it's wrong. But I have no choice if I want to keep my job, a job that I love. I loved my job to the very last day. It was my dream since I was this big, right? I loved and I needed that job, so I did it. But I said it was sick and wrong, and Disney is the company that owns ESPN and ABC. At that moment, I didn't think it was that big of a deal because I complied. And there's actually a statute in the state of Connecticut. You can criticize your employer if you're following the rules, if you're complying with their rules. I didn't know that at the time. That took an attorney to tell me that later. But I actually really, really did nothing wrong. Most importantly, because my peers, this was on an off day, on an off podcast, so it had nothing to do with ESPN. My personal opinions, my personal story about being a biracial woman and women in sports, what I thought we could do better as women in sports. Separate. My peers are allowed to go on ESPN platforms, and talk about their thoughts on George Floyd and race in America and Roe versus Wade on an NBA show. I don't understand how any of that, when it was overturned, how any of that has anything to do with sports. But they're fine and allowed to do it. And I'm crushed, and I'm pulled off the air, sorry, we'll work on the PowerPoint, and suspended, and assignments taken away, and stuff that I had worked on for months not aired. And forced to publicly apologize. Forced, or else I was out of a job. So my thing was, give me consistency. I think that's all of us want. Even as a parent, your kids might not like your rules, but are you consistent with the rules with each kid? Not just some of the ones, right? No, you can't pick and choose. And that moment, that's when I realized I had to stand up. I could not do this any longer. When they allowed others, but not me, when I was one of the longest tenured people on SportsCenter, all of the things that I thought I had done the right way through the years. So I decided to talk to an attorney and file a lawsuit. The night before the lawsuit, well, it wasn't fun. The night before the lawsuit landed, I spoke to each one of my 3 children. One was a freshman in college, one was a senior in high school, one was a sophomore in high school. This is 3 years ago. And each one had a different reaction, but pretty supportive. My son, who's in the middle of my 2 psycho daughters, I sat him down, and he's really observant and quiet, and he just was looking at me, and I was crying, and I said, I just want you to know, all 3 of you, you don't have to defend me, you don't have to agree with me. All I'm asking you to do is if a teacher or a coach or another parent or someone online, that it all happened, they'd all said stuff to my kids in classrooms about their mother. I said, just tell them, you don't have to agree, but everyone has a right to their opinion. It's diversity of thought, period. And so we don't have to agree, but be kind, but don't ever feel the need to defend me, and I am sorry for what might come your way. And my son, my quiet son, who's 6'4", 220, looked at me, and he said, Mom, it's about time you stood up for yourself. Here's the thing, I didn't know. This whole time, I'm staying silent, I'm hiding everything, I'm keeping my thoughts to myself for the most part. I'd slip some stuff out on Twitter here or there, and I did it for them, to keep my job, but also because I didn't want to upset them. So we stay quiet as parents to protect. In doing so, that's costly. That's what I learned at that moment. They watch every single thing that we do and don't do. And in that moment, I realized by staying quiet, my son saw me making myself smaller. I'd done it my whole life. For my kid to say that, I realized that no matter what happened with Disney, because this is certainly a David versus Goliath story, who am I? They could bleed me dry in 5 minutes financially, right? It's Disney. What am I going to do? But I knew that no matter what at that point, I was going to win regardless, because my kid saw that I was no longer living in fear. 3 weeks after I filed the lawsuit and went into work and was a disaster, emotionally, actually I did my best work under that pressure over those 22 months, I don't know why. I got hit in the face. I was working at a golf tournament in Oklahoma, Southern Hills, and listen, I've been to a million golf tournaments, I know how to act on a golf course, and I was against the ropes, 280 yards away, and John Rahm, one of the hardest hitters on the planet, bad shot, and we were so far away that we couldn't hear 4. I was looking this way when the ball came through the trees and hit me, direct shot, no bounce, on my teeth. And it bounced so hard off of my teeth that it went back all the way into the middle of the fairway. And they were like, oh, wow, lucky shot, hit a tree, par the hole, great. Wasn't a tree, it's my mouth. You guys, I don't know how. First of all, if I had been looking down at my phone for a split second, that doesn't hit me in the teeth, it hits me in my cheek, my eye, my temple, and I'm probably not here. So what a blessing that at that split second, I was looking up instead of down. And I'm on the ground, and I was obviously alive, but they were hiding me from the cameras because they didn't want it to be on TV. And I'm on my knees, and this is 3 weeks after. You see my bloody hand? I had just taken all the teeth and the flesh and everything and just realized they weren't going to be able to glue it back in. And I went like that, and I guess someone took that photo, and I remember being on the ground and just thinking, this is what I get for speaking up. This is what happens when you use your mouth to stand up and be true to yourself and you don't fit into the little box. And at that moment, I remember thinking, everyone, my peers, all my former friends, all my woke friends, my bosses are like, that's what she gets. This is what happens. Stay quiet. So I feel like there was this evil force that was making me tempted to drop the whole lawsuit at that moment. I'm grateful for that graphic picture because those thoughts in my mind at that time almost changed my life and made me run back into a hole. And for some reason, it switched, and I know it was God. I know that's what made me say, no. We've come too far. We're not going to turn around at this point just because all my teeth are gone. So 8 teeth, 3 root canals, stitches all over the place, a mess, fake teeth for 4 months. Now they're good, right? somehow this amazing, if you ever get hit in the mouth by a golf ball, I have a great dentist for you in Canton, Connecticut. You don't have to go to New York City. It's not, this guy saved me. My mouth is my moneymaker. That's what helped me, support my family, and at that moment it was gone. Of all places to hit me. Do you blame me for thinking, okay, this is a message, shut up? And I will say, I went back to work in 20 days because I was afraid they were going to think that I was milking it, and I don't know, there were so many crazy emotions. And every single day, from the moment actually I got suspended in October of 2021 to 22 months later when I left ESPN, I would drive to work and I would sit there and I'd put my mascara on and I'd call my mom and dad. And my parents would pray with me every day before I walked in there. I was so scared every day going in that building because my bosses, everyone told me how many people hated me, my peers, my teammates. I was so scared. But I felt like after that prayer every day, I had a bubble of protection around me, not only from what I felt in that building, and by the way, there were a ton of incredible people who came quietly in the bathroom or would send quiet notes thanking me. That's what kept me going too. But that prayer, I'd walk in, and somehow I'd put it all back here and do my job and tell stories and do highlights and continue on and do the job that I loved even though they were trying to crush me. So I don't know, is that the harder right? I don't know. It was just survival for the job that I loved, and I was mad that it was being taken away from me. August 14th, 2023, the lawsuit settled. And I will tell you, I was devastated because I knew it was coming, but it was like it didn't have to be this way. It didn't have to be this way, but I knew that I could no longer look myself in the mirror if I didn't do the right thing and stand up for people who didn't have a voice, who were so scared and making themselves smaller like I did my entire life to fit into this little box. So I left. It's been crazy since then. But I cannot tell you, like, I didn't know there was a whole world out here of people who are nice, who smile, who are supportive, but also people who respect diversity of thought. That is everything. I've been saying it for 15 years on platforms when I speak to college students. I don't care how you vote. How do you treat me? How do you treat your neighbors? How my peers in the business? How are you when the cameras aren't on? When you're not in front of the GM or the CEO or LeBron James? Like, how do you act? How do you treat people? That matters. And this is my why. These are my babies. And on August 12th, I will become an empty nester. My youngest daughter is going to college. The other two will be a junior and a senior in college. And my mom and dad in those pictures as well. He did a good job on these. He put the ones I approved on this screen. Good job, Gary Steele. This is my why. This, to me, we all have to know our why, right? And I look back on this dream of a career that I had and the amazing people that I met and the lessons that I learned, that no matter how hard you work sometimes or how nice you are, not everybody's going to like you, and that's okay. It's a gift to be okay not being liked. It's only taken 50 years, but I think I'm there. And at the end of the day, you know there's other people watching you. You know there are. Never forget this, you guys. That's the one thing I beg of you. Maybe it's just a grocery cart, putting the cart back, taking those extra 30 seconds. Maybe it's standing up for yourself at work when you're afraid to, when you know in your heart that's the right thing, because it isn't just about you, it's about others who are also fearful. Maybe it's Mona and Gary Steele, who in 53 years, they're going to be married in October. Maybe it's my parents who took that chance on themselves when their family, when everybody left them, they chose the harder right. I beg of you, we all know when we're making decisions, we know the right thing. We just don't like it sometimes. And I don't ever want you to be content, what this says, with a half-truth when the whole truth can be one. We are living in the most difficult times, at least in my lifetime. I'll be 52 this year, over half a century. This is the most difficult time, but we have the chance to make a difference by doing what? By choosing the harder right. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being so supportive. God bless you all. Thank you.